Welcome back to the Cineposium podcast, where each week members or collaborators of Cineposium curate films for remote viewing, and then talk about those films on this podcast. In this week's episode, Alexx Apiccela, Iftin Abshir, Mike Mazzacane, Alexandra James Salich, and myself, Martin Ibarra Ramos, discuss some of our personal favorite uses of music in film. Enjoy the conversation. All right, well, here we are with episode 7 or 8. I think it's 8 of our 4th season here, and we're here for a big group episode. I think this is actually maybe the only second time in our podcast that we've had 5 members here on the same episode, so that's pretty exciting. This is also, I think, the first episode in which we, did a sort of fan or audience poll to see what the topic would be, and so the audience decided on our topic being our favorite uses of music in film. And we decided to keep the limits of that actually fairly open, to interpretation. So these choices could include, soundtrack drops into films or overall music supervision or, specific sequences with music, compositions, what have you. It could be anything. So we've already listened to each other's picks, but we're going to go one by one and talk about each person's picks. So with that out of the way, I guess just thank you everyone for being here. Should I just go first? I guess in the list that we put together, my choices are first. So I guess I'll go ahead and get things started. So the first one that I want to bring up then, I guess, is one that I think kind of came first in mind when trying to brainstorm examples for this topic, because it feels like such a classic, just a classic scene in film in general. But in terms of music, it's one that I always go back to. It's just such a fun example. So it's the sequence in Beetlejuice that incorporates the Deo Banana Boat song. And this is just such a personal favorite because Beetlejuice is a classic for me. It's just the perfect mixture of, sort of dark gothic aesthetics with comedy, and just sort of it goes all over the place. And I think the performances within really drive that home. And in this sequence in particular, I think Catherine O'Hara is just delightful. And I think all the performances are, but I really attached to Catherine O'Hara for some reason. I think I've always loved all her work, and in this in particular, I think she really goes for it, and it's just so much fun for me to watch her and the rest of the group in this scene sort of enjoy like the moment, but also like be confused at the same time. There's something in that I just really enjoy. So I think within you get a good mix of like the fun sort of dancing confusion mixed with the sort of really cool and creepy set design around, and then obviously that moment with the hands jumping out of the food at the end there really caps it off. It's so much fun. Do you guys have any thoughts about this scene?
Yeah, I have to say, like, it made so much sense. Like when I was like trying to think of music and films, and you had picked this one, I was like, this just makes sense. Like it is just like one of those iconic scenes of like popular music in a film, and it's so funny. It is so funny, and I think that like even like yeah, it's just like choreographically, just in general, like the performances that everyone is giving to like do these dance moves, but to do them in like the most confused way possible is like just so good. It is fantastic.
Yeah. Although I do have to say, it is slightly jarring if you have like the first time you see this, to hear Harry Belafonte's voice or come out of Catherine O'Hara's face, and it's a really great job of all of the actors pantomiming, but it's still sometimes it feels a little, I don't know, off-putting, which I think for Beetlejuice is appropriate in some ways. But I just love the silliness of this scene. I think it really is so well done. And I saw you pick that, I thought, oh, this is a good one.
Absolutely agree with that. I totally feel the same sort of like jarring sense, but it's not the most it doesn't necessarily pull me out of it, but I mean, I guess it just does feel a little off-putting, or like I guess, as you say, like the appropriate level of jarring for what this film really does throughout it. You're kind of mixed. You're laughing, but you're also like concerned and a little scared, especially if you're younger, like me when the first time I watched this movie. I'm pretty sure that hand scene at the end there really scared me, but the song is also just so random to me. It's not a song you listen to, like, driving on the highway one day, just put that song on. It's never really something you listen to, but then it just pops up here in this really great way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's honestly probably one of the more creative ways to incorporate, I guess, for lack of a better way to phrase this, but just popular songs within a film. I think, traditionally you just kind of plop the song right in there and it's kind of like, ooh, the lyrics just fit the moment. But I think by having just two completely like random songs just inserted into it, it makes it jarring. But I think all the actors just really like great lip syncing to it, in addition to the pantomiming, and they just really go for it in a way that, yeah, just even if it's initially jarring, you accept it and then you kind of just go with it and just sort of enjoy the scene for what it is. I think it's something that I haven't seen replicated many times. At least in live action. I think in animated it's a little easier to sort of do these kinds of things, but in live action films for sure it doesn't happen often, and I think they pulled it off really well.
Yes, so absolutely love this, and I think it's one that no matter how many times I watch, I will always have a smile on my face. So I think, yeah, there's something to say about that as well. Um, okay, so I guess we can move on then. I'll share my second pick here. So another one that came up is one that's, I think, one of the more emotional picks, at least for me. So it's the "Remember Me" song and scene at the end of Coco, when Miguel is playing it for his grandma, Mama Coco. So, I mean, I think this is a pick just because there's for so many reasons. I think there's so much going on and leading up to this moment, right? So it's, I mean, just in general, the song is beautiful, the lyrics are beautiful, and performance is great. But there's obviously the sense that, Miguel's family doesn't want him to sing, but he finally gets that chance to perform in front of them, to say, stop, you finally they're going to listen to him perform, which is, I think, something throughout the film you're just waiting for that to happen, right? Then obviously Mama Coco's condition has been declining, and she starts to improve as she hears her father's song that he wrote for her, and everyone starts to slowly become overjoyed. I think, actually, is Mama Coco Miguel's grandmother or great grandmother? I think she's his great grandmother, if I'm remembering
I believe
correctly.
she's the great grandmother,
Because his grandmother is the one who's telling him not to sing, and
Right.
Okay,
exactly.
so even you see the shift in her when she sees her mother singing. So there's that feeling as well. I just think it tugs on so many different heartstrings at the same time that it's just like I can't help but cry no matter how many times I see this. But yeah, it's a song about a father who leaves his family behind, and obviously we learned that he chose to come back, but he couldn't. And I think there's also that moment in which Miguel tells Mama Coco, he loved you so much, and she doesn't know that he actually met her father, and they spend all this time together. But it's just this sort of an embrace that they share, just because they love each other, because they're family. And I think that in itself is just a really emotional and profound moment. But yeah, I think there's just so much revealed, and there's so much of like build up to this, that it just really hits me in all directions.
Yeah, I think you're touching on really the emotional weight of that song. And, like you, I completely broke down with this final song. I think for me as well, just, add the emotional weight to what this song means to Mama Coco. But like, on top of that, there's these high stakes, right? Like, if, since, you know, she is, I believe, has dementia or some sort of mentally degenerative disease, like she is the only one who truly can remember her father. And once, you know, and with this lore in the film, like as soon as she will forget the father will die in the afterlife. And I think it's just sort of, you've grown to love her father throughout the film. You kind of learn that he really wasn't like a deadbeat dad. He truly did care about his family, just he died without being able to return back. And yeah, like as much as there's this emotional weight to the song, there's this urgency that like this is the last shot that Miguel has to remind, like to allow his great grandfather to live in the afterlife, because otherwise, you know, he kind of disappears. So it's just sort of this not only emotional weight, but high stakes of, you know, your characters, this beloved character you've kind of grown to watch is going to either die or survive based on whether or not Mama Coco remembers. And, you know, ultimately, yes, this is a Disney Pixar film, so the likelihood of him dying is not going to happen. But I think regardless, I think the film does a really good job of just amping up those stakes, amping up that emotional weight to just mentally, emotionally destroy you.
Definitely. And I think another thing that Disney does well is that they do get, I don't know, it was the lore or even the science right in this instance. So Mama Coco, like you mentioned, Alex, does have dementia, and so she's not remembering her father. And so this is Miguel's attempt to try to jog her memory and to stimulate her memory of her father. And I think most all of you know this, but my grandmother has dementia. And so last week we actually went, my mother and I, that's the we attended this online training session for families dealing with loved ones who are, you know, have been diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's. And in so many of the sessions, they say that music is really one of the biggest triggers of memory for people who have dementia. And so I think the way that they were able to use music throughout the film, but in this instance that as Miguel is playing the song, you can see the light kind of returning to Mama Coco's eyes, that she's recognizing the music, and it's touching a part of her brain that has been dormant for so long because her family completely shut out music. And so it's, as Miguel is playing, you see her coming alive, and then eventually she starts singing. She joins in and sings with Miguel, and then that's when she actually starts opening up and she shares these memories of her father and the letters that he wrote to her, and then actually has the picture, which of course fits in with the rest of the family picture that had been ripped up by Mama Coco's mother, so Miguel's great grandmother. So I think it's just it touches and it works on so many different levels, which I think is fantastic. And I don't know, one of the reasons I think I love Disney Pixar, so they just know how to tug on all of those heartstrings and bring all of these different elements together in a really elegant way. I think the scene is able to do that. I
also wanted to quickly say that I think, you know, we hear that song, like different variations of it throughout the film. If I'm remembering correctly, there's like a larger ensemble version. There's the way that that I think his name is Hector, the great grandfather. We hear him perform it, and then towards the end, it's this very slowly paced acoustic with Miguel like breaking up as he's singing it, and it's just, it's brutal to get through that scene. But okay, I guess unless anyone else has anything to say, we can move along to the next choice. All right, so I don't have the list in front of me, so forgive me. Who is next here?
I think that's me.
Okay, Alex, go ahead.
So yeah, I chose. I think, first of all, I think when I kind of went into this, my brain kind of goes more towards how does a film incorporate a not necessarily popular song, but sort of songs that aren't exclusively, not like Coco, that exclusively write these songs for the films, or they're not using it for lip syncing. They're just adding these sort of, popular songs for an added dimension to what is happening in the film's narrative at that point. So I chose In the Mood for Love, specifically the Quizás, Quizás, Quizás Nat King Cole song. Quizás, Quizás, Quizás is has been redone and done by many, many artists, but they specifically choose Nat King Cole. They incorporate a lot of Nat King Cole songs throughout the film, but I think just what holds a lot, I think, like Coco, it's this sort of moment that really packs an emotional punch, especially with this song added. I guess just to have a little summary, In the Mood for Love is about two characters who realize that their spouses are having affairs with each other, and they sort of bond through that and eventually build this extremely romantic tension of will they, won't they. And this is towards the end of the film where they sort of finally agree to consummate their love. They agree to meet at a hotel, and in a sort of missed connection moment, the man, he goes to the hotel room, kind of waits there. They agreed at a certain time to meet. That time has come and passed. She does not appear, so he leaves the hotel, and shortly after he leaves the hotel, she decides to go and goes to the hotel, and of course he's not there. She misses him by a few minutes. This song is sort of playing in the background, and quizás, quizás, quizás means maybe in Spanish. So it's this whole just re-emphasizing the entire film of what would have happened if they got together, what could have been had they reached the hotel at the same time. And you see Maggie Cheung at the end of this clip just have this like beautiful, like she's not having this raw breakdown, but you see the tears coming through her eyes. And they've had throughout most of this film this like emotional restraint that I think seeing her have these tears shed, she's not necessarily like sobbing in this melodramatic way, but you just see through her eyes just how much she's coming to the realization that like he's not coming. And I think having just this sort of love song depicting like maybe we could be together, maybe things can work out. I don't know. I personally love this film. This is one of my favorite films of all time, and I think just every time I see this, like, it's sort of just a gut punch for me. And I think I don't know if other people feel the same way, but I think Wong Kar-wai does an amazing job just amping up these stakes throughout the film, and then sort of really delivering that blow for you of no, they're not getting together. This is not a happy film. They're just going to have this misconnection, and you're going to sit there wondering what could have been.
Yeah, Wong Kar-wai is, I love his work, and I particularly love in the Mood for Love. And yeah, I think you're right, Alex, how he builds this suspense, and he kind of builds this this moment that you think something is happening or going to happen, and you feel this tension mounting, and then at this point they miss each other just by minutes. I mean, it's devastating to think how they became so close to finally being able to get the love that they deserve, and yet it doesn't happen. And I think something that's really interesting in this instance, it's like you mentioned, the Nat King Cole version, Quizás, 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 but I believe in the rest of the film you kind of do hear this same song repeated as sort of like a musical leitmotif, but at times they also have the English version of the song, Perhaps, Perhaps, Perhaps. So I think it's interesting how the choices that Wong Kar-wai made when to use each version of the song, but I think it works so well throughout the film.
Yeah, there's very little that this film doesn't do perfectly in my mind. I'm not sure there's anything that it doesn't do perfectly. It's one of those films that you really just sort of blown away by, in my opinion. It's from cinematography to performance to costume design to, I mean, the list just goes on and on. It's just truly a beautiful film on every level. And yeah, I think this song is a great choice for me because I think it really just matches the sort of overall like romantic elegance that the film is just sort of spewing out. There's so much tension, I think, building throughout the film, and you want these two to be together. I mean, I absolutely do, because they're obviously both being wronged and deserve each other, I think. But so I think this song does a great job of just like in a subtle but very profound way, play into that and drive that home, I think, in a way that really works. Yeah, beautiful version of the song. I don't think I'd heard Nat King Cole's version before watching this film, but I think it works really nicely.
Yeah, I agree. I think also just that sort of Nat King Cole being part of that tradition of 50s, 60s crooner kind of adds to that emotional weight, I think. I mean, granted, this film does take place around that time period, so it also not only canonically fits, but it also, in a way, just invokes this sort of elegant romance, like you say, of that is in the film that like I think these characters truly embody. I think that in a way, I don't know, maybe this is just me thinking in a more like national cinema context, but this film also just has these heavy undertones of these, in a way that their love is sort of that idea of Hong Kong independence. I think just sort of In the Mood for Love, in a way, kind of becomes this thought piece of, could Hong Kong truly be independent? Could it have its sort of cultural, maybe political independence, but I don't know, maybe I guess in sort of contemporary, historic, contemporary times, it sort of even packs a more of an emotional punch for me, knowing that Wong Kar-wai made this in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it was 2000.
Yeah, shortly after Hong Kong is transferred over to China. And I think having this sort of like, I don't know, maybe it's like he just kind of knows that this dream of Hong Kong independence is just not going to happen. And I think just within the sort of 20 years that this film has been made and then seen, I think it's in a way sort of heartbreaking to see that slowly that sort of dream is going to diminish. I think I don't know, it's sort of further adding the emotional weight to this film.
And I think that the use of like Nat King Cole songs in film also is like, I think Martin, you had said, is like very rare, and like we don't hear a lot of Nat King Cole in films. And the only other film that I've heard a Nat King Cole song in that I could think of was actually Zack Snyder's Watchmen from 2009. They play Nat King Cole's Unforgettable as they murder the comedian. So a very yeah, it's like a very like dramatically opposing use of like a Nat King Cole song. So it's like fantastic, I think, like to kind of like think of like just the amount of contrast that's happening in the uses of just one artist's two different songs, two completely different films, two completely different contexts, creating two completely different atmospheres. So it's wow.
Yeah, I think I've only ever heard, I mean, as a kid growing up, I've only ever really heard Nat King Cole in like a Christmas context with like chestnuts roasting on an open fire. I feel like they've definitely dropped him in quite a few Christmas movies, but yeah, I agree. I think his other songs and other renditions rarely are used. I think he deserves a lot more love in film, but I think in the general sense, like I said at the beginning of introducing this is sort of the more traditional way that music in film is sort of inserted. I mean, beyond your sort of orchestral soundtrack score. But yeah, I think it in a way, I think Wong Kar-wai really does think through, why is this song included in this film, rather than what I think a lot of popular mainstream songs do, is just sort of like, this song is popular, this song is great, let's just put it in there without really sort of thinking about why, which I guess like lends itself to many parodies of people being like, of course rom-coms are going to insert like whatever happy peppy popular song is happening at the moment. But yeah, I think this is one of the more creative ways to take a traditional form of incorporating music and truly using it to the fullest of its advantage.
Can I add a little something to this?
No.
Oh, okay, if you don't want me to. No, like it's just I always think about this set of films of like it's Chungking Express into In the Mood for Love into 2046, and that how that like Hong Kong trilogy kind of works, and how really Wong Kar-wai's use of pop culture, like but like international pop culture, really stands out as a means of like creating this international mood and sense of dislocation. It's like it, I do not know what the distribution of sound of music was like that, but it's this very strange kind of like you. It makes sense for his movies because that's just kind of what he does. Um, but it's still like if you're thinking like, ah, yes, a Hong Kong film, like would it have this song? Because like in Chungking Express, he uses California Dreamin' and then does like a cover of the Cranberry song, and so it's very um, it's I don't know, it's just yeah, his use of music is very interesting.
No, I think those are really excellent points. I think it is a very Wong Kar-wai sort of thing to do, including songs you wouldn't think fit in sort of, you know, him being a Hong Kong director, and really does center around Hong Kong and picking mostly English speaking songs that are from typically America to sort of incorporate. I think is both, you know, sort of his style, but also just it works. And I don't know, like you said, I don't know if that's just because it's Wong Kar-wai or if it just works because it can. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything to say. I can move to my second choice. Yeah, okay. So my second choice is also like In the Mood for Love, sort of more the general soundtrack to this film. It's Sofia Coppola's Marie Antoinette. I think I specifically shared to y'all the shopping scene, which uses I Want Candy. But yeah, I think for me that the scene is Marie Antoinette. She's already married, living in Versailles, and you just have her going through this extremely lavish, luscious shopping montage, essentially, with her friends. They're drinking, they're eating, they're having fun, they're trying on all these shoes. I think what Coppola does so well with this, especially incorporating I Want Candy, is she takes something that for us really historically removed, right? This is Marie Antoinette, we're in the 1700s on the eve of the French Revolution. And I think we think about that sort of historical timepiece as like, you know, that's so far away, it can't be relatable. And I think she really does take inserting I Want Candy and really just having this moment that isn't I mean, it's not historical. I mean, you see like a picture of I think you see like a shot of Converse in there at one point. I don't know if that was on purpose or accidental, but I think just sort of like really inserting that, you know, that sort of contemporary moment into this film. And she does it quite a few times with other sort of new wave British bands playing. But I think it just really contextualizes, I guess, just Marie Antoinette wasn't just sort of this like stuffy, you know, let them eat cake, which turns out to be a false statement that she ever made. But, you know, we have this idea of Marie Antoinette of being this excessive, lavish person who didn't care about people. And Coppola does such a wonderful job of taking her and really just sort of making us understand that she was just this young girl thrown into a life of extreme wealth. And, you know, she didn't really know what she was doing. I think she just kind of gets sucked into everything. And I think this shopping scene just makes it all the more relatable to your, you know, this is made in 2006. It just really added to, I think, the aughts teen movies. You know, there was always a shopping scene. I think of Clueless. I think of like any other teen comedy at that point, which had a like makeover shopping scene, and it really just sort of emphasizes Marie Antoinette wasn't this grown woman who didn't care. She was just a kid, I think, who was just shopping with her friends. And I think it just adds this sort of messaging to just sort of redefine Marie Antoinette as not this villainous queen, but rather that she was just someone who got sucked into all of this and was probably just a victim to the to the sort of French royal family, which, you know, now I think of Meghan Markle, but yeah, I don't know. What were your guys' thoughts?
So I've never seen Marie Antoinette. This is my first experience with this film. I've also not seen any other Sofia Coppola films other than The Beguiled, which is a very dramatically different type of period piece from the vibes that I was getting from this musical scene. But I thought it was fun. I think that this was just, again, like, I haven't seen the full film Marie Antoinette. I've just seen this scene, but this is like a fun way to do a period piece. I think that like a lot of period pieces kind of like fail to attract audiences in that they are very serious and very oftentimes just like unrelatable, just due to the fact that there was a perception that like humanity back then is not the same as humanity back now. But I think that the scene using "I want candy" is very like ferally human, like ferally modern, and like you sit there and you're like, yes, this is like people shopping in like the 16th 17th century, and it's the same as people shopping in the 2000s. And like it's just a great way to draw that like trans time connection. It's fantastic.
I've not seen this film either, so this is my only experience as well with it. But I have wanted to see it. I recently visited the House of Versailles, and so now I'm even more intrigued to watch it. I wanted to say similarly that I thought this was just a lot of fun, and in a way, it kind of to piggyback off of what Alex was just talking about. I think it kind of reminded me of how Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes' Romeo and Juliet was treated in a way, like turning a period piece sort of on its head in a little more in a sort of fun and more relevant way. And this is one of the examples that we're going to talk about today in particular that I think from a craft perspective really handles pacing really nicely. I think the music and the rhythm of the music tied to the pacing of the cuts, I think, works particularly well for this sort of montage. It really kind of feels like this could be a sort of like commercial for like a, you know, like some expensive store that I can't shop at. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the craft and a lot of what goes into this scene for sure.
I haven't seen this. Okay, so like this was the first Sofia Coppola movie I saw, but like it's a great two-hander kind of pop version of the Virgin Suicides to a degree. And it's just like it kind of like that sort of like as this like double feature with that, it makes so much more sense to me because like I saw it originally as a double feature between that and Vanity Fair with uh who was in Sweet Home Alabama? Reese Witherspoon, that's it. Anyway, and so like those are two very different movies in terms of like costume period pieces. And so it's just yeah, it's a great kind of use of like not discordant, but yeah, just really nice use of music to humanize a character that we think of that like it's a period movie. It's not history. It's all fiction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean even when I think I remember either listening or watching an interview with Coppola, and she's I think explicitly talking about the fact, like I think a lot of people question her about why are you including all these pop songs in a a period piece, right? As I think Alex pointed out, we think of period pieces being these super serious, dramatic Oscar bait kind of films, and she just sort of was, yeah. And I think it's just, I think the way that she responds is so great in that she's kind of just saying like, well, I didn't want to make something that was truly accurate. I wanted to make something that was more authentic to probably what was the experience of these people. And rather than make something that was truly, oh, we have to use the exact fabrics and cloth and lifestyle. And I think it's very rare to have a period piece that does hearken more towards the authentic experience rather than trying to really just ground you in the time period. And yeah, I mean, I think we'll cover this later, but I think Bridgerton does a very similar way of doing this, in sort of, in a way, I don't know, in Marie Antoinette, in Bridgerton, you're not necessarily taken out of the historical period. I think like I think the film industry tends to hyper focus that if we don't have everything completely accurate, and we have like one thing that is sort of ahistorical within that context, you know, everything is ruined and we're gonna completely not get the point of the movie. And I think films like Marie Antoinette and Bridgerton really just highlight that's not the case. I think what audiences just want is to be transported to that time, but not necessarily like I don't particularly care if, you know, some dress style is 1 or 2 years off from what the actual like film is. Or I think in Bridgerton, a lot of fashion historians did say like the costuming wasn't necessarily accurate, but the costuming did fit the sort of themes that the show was playing. And I think, I think even for those who haven't seen it, you guys really did pick up on the sort of themes that Coppola was really trying to highlight. I mean, I would recommend watching the entire thing. I think, again, she does a really great job of just sort of saying that these royals at this time, at best, were in their early 20s. Like, you know, they're getting married when they're about 15, 16. I think we think of royalty as these sort of like older people who were trained for all this, but in reality, they were just, in essence, spoiled kids who had no idea what they were doing. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's great that Coppola is able to sort of break away from the tradition of period pieces and just kind of bring you this experience.
Yeah, so true. And I think I might actually jump in line here, and because I was actually going to talk about Bridgerton, so I'm so glad that you brought it up. And I think what Sofia Coppola did in Marie Antoinette was using these not these non-period authentic pieces of music, but that fit thematically. And it really kind of started a trend in these period films that they'd be able to do that, have that kind of juxtaposition. And I love in Marie Antoinette specifically how it's so bright and so vibrant, which again is what you don't necessarily think of when you're thinking of a period historical drama, but it definitely fits for the themes, and it works perfectly. And so I love that scene, that shopping sequence with I Want Candy. But yeah, Sofia Coppola kind of started this, and I was even thinking, I think just the 2 television shows actually that came out last year. So The Great, which is a story, retelling, a sometimes, what's the tagline? A occasionally true story of Catherine the Great. And they do something very similar to what Sofia Coppola did in Marie Antoinette, is that they would use pop music from, a lot of it was from the 80s, a lot of kind of like alt rock they would incorporate into the ends of the episodes that kind of tied in thematically for what was going on. For example, in one of the episodes, the end credit sequence plays She Blinded Me by Science, which, of course, is a very 80s synth pop piece of music. And throughout that entire episode, Catherine the Great was trying to get her husband Peter to incorporate more themes of enlightenment and science. And so it kind of ties in nicely that way. And I think what I was going to talk about with Bridgerton a little bit, which Alex, you hit on so many of the points so beautifully and eloquently, so thank you for that. But one of the things with Bridgerton is that the music supervisor for the series, who I personally have a huge crush on, I love everything that she's done, Alexandra Petsavitz, she was able to take these pop pieces of music. So the clip that I actually shared with the group, it's from episode 1. It's the first ball of the season. So the entire first season of Bridgerton is taking place over what they call the season, which is when young debutantes are out socially looking for a husband and someone to marry. So it's the first ball of the season, and it starts with this beautiful, well, I also absolutely adore Julie Andrews, and she's the voiceover of Lady Whistledown, who's kind of like the gossip girl of the series. And it starts with her kind of talking about sort of the social atmosphere, the women who are desperate to find a mate and you don't want to get caught up in scandal. And then underneath that, you hear this beautiful string quartet playing this music, and it's kind of light and airy. And then you're about halfway into the scene when all of a sudden you realize, wait, I think, isn't this Thank You Next by Ariana Grande? And it kind of just pulls you out of it for a second. And you're like, wow, that's so cool. I know the first time I watched, I had to go back from the beginning and start rewatching the entire scene over again, because I was like, wow, this is actually Thank You Next. So it was played by the Vitamin String Quartet. And this just happens in the first episode, but there are actually numerous remakes of these pop songs in a so this takes place in the 18th century. It's set in the early the 19th century, excuse me. It's set in the 19th century, so the early 1800s. And so it kind of fits thematically with having these string quartets, but they are playing pop songs. So in episode 2, there's a version of In My Blood by Shawn Mendes, which is beautiful. And another one that's my absolute favorite is in episode 3, they have the Vitamin String Quartet also doing a rendition of Bad Guy by Billie Eilish. And this works really thematically. It's in another ball when I love these period pieces of how so much drama goes down at these balls, and who's looking at who across the room and who's going to dance with everyone. But Bad Guy just really works because it's in the middle of Daphne and the Duke of Hastings kind of ruse that they're pretending to be in a courtship in order to, one, get the mother hens off of the Duke of Hastings' back, but also attract suitors that Daphne wants to marry. So they're in the midst of their ruse, and then that's when Bad Guys by Billie Eilish starts playing. But I think it works just so well in this instance that it still has these period pieces where the themes kind of connect to what's happening in the show, but then at the same time, the style fits with the time period that we're working here. So I think it's kind of a different take on what we originally saw with Marie Antoinette. Those are my thoughts on that.
Okay, well, I'm going to start because once again, I have not seen this this show.
You haven't seen Bridgerton?
No,
really?
but I will say you have effectively persuaded me, because I do love period pieces, and anything with a bunch of drama, I'm here for. So I'm totally gonna watch this maybe later tonight. We'll see. But this is the other one that I wanted to talk about here that I think just does a fabulous job of crafting, because as you sort of pointed out already, it's the music is really subtle at the beginning. It's very much under the dialogue, the sort of crowd noise of the scene, and then it sort of builds up, and then characters meet, and it slowly hides behind dialogue again. And I think the funny thing, there's a saying that you'll hear, about sound and about sound editing, is that usually good sound editing goes unnoticed. It's invisible. But the funny thing is, for me as a sound editor, I always pay attention, and I'm always noticing really, really great editing work. And I think here, this is one of those examples that just sort of rides with the scene perfectly. It's there when it needs to be, and it's subtle in background when it needs to be, but at all times it's really beautifully composed, and I think works perfectly for this scene. So that's, I think, what stood out to me with this, just how subtly it's there, but I think it does a great job of setting the tone and not taking you out of it, despite being this cover of such a popular song and artist.
Yeah, I think also just adding to that sort of thematic, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is yes, it's the first ball scene, but I think this is also the first moment where Daphne, who has kind of been crowned as the it girl of the season, and I think she comes into this sort of very excited to be courted by hundreds of men, only to have her brother essentially shoo them all away because they have some sort of this guy owes too much money to so and so, or I heard he has a mistress on the side. And I think it's just sort of having that sort of tongue-in-cheek "thank you next," because the brother really truly is being okay, thank you next, no, you're not good enough for my sister.
So it's such a rude way. But at the same time, he still has all of his mannerisms of being a lord.
Yeah, exactly. I think so I liked the the tongue-in-cheekness that especially I think they have, as you noted in other episodes. With bad guy, you have Daphne and the Duke of Hastings sort of being the bad guys in this moment, and they're doing something wrong. You're not supposed to be pretending you're in love. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, also I think in another episode they do a Taylor Swift cover in the moment where they fall in love or like are just starting to get attracted to each other. So I think, I think it's just sort of, not only is it this subtle way and beautiful way to like really, I guess, contextualize these, this what seemingly is very distant historical moments and really having you feel like, no, these are real teenagers going through teenage romance drama, just I guess in a different social setting, but also, like I think the other songs we've talked about, they really add more to the narrative. They add more to what is happening in the scene. They're not just random pop songs included, I guess.
Definitely. And the Taylor Swift song is Wildest Dreams. And it's in episode 6, right after the Duke and Daphne got married. So it's on their honeymoon, which if you know, you know. Okay, well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump in line. I can keep going, or if we want to get back in the proper order. But I just felt like this topic dovetailed so nicely with what Alex was talking about. I thought I'll just sneak it in there.
No, I think it was great.
Yeah, that worked perfectly. Why don't you just take us into your next pick?
Okay, so the next pick I did, it's not really one particular scene from a from a movie, or I really never pick movies because you know me, I'm going to be a rebel and I always pick TV shows. I also feel like every time I'm on this podcast, I'm going to find a way to work in the OC in one way or the other. So my next pick is actually the entire series of Looking for Alaska. So this is from 2018. It is a mini series that was produced for Hulu. It was produced by Josh Schwartz and Stephanie Savage, who of course we know from the OC. And I just want to talk about the way that the music is used kind of throughout the series to tell the story. So if you don't know, the Looking for Alaska is based on the John Green novel by the same name. And it tells the story of these young high schoolers who are living at a boarding school in rural, I believe it's Alabama, but somewhere in the South. And it takes place in the actual, the entire book, the whole mini series takes place over one school year. So it's the 2005 to 2006 school year. So we have a very specific set time period in which we're working with in this episode or in this series. And one of the things that is so great and that I personally love watching when I watched the show when it first came out in 2019 is it has so much nostalgia for someone like myself who was a teenager in the early to mid 2000s and was a huge fan of the OC. So like I said, Schwartz and Savage were the producers of the OC, and that series, it was very revolutionary in the way that they incorporated music so fully and completely into both the diegesis of the series by having music actually like being played and performed on the show, which was really revolutionary for the time, but also the way that they used contemporary music of kind of up and coming new bands and incorporated that into the series as well. So what Schwartz and Savage, they kind of create this great working relationship with, again, my favorite music supervisor, Alexandra Potasavitz from Chop Shop Music. And they brought her back again to do Looking for Alaska. And so what they were able to do with this series is they took many of the songs that fans of the OC will recognize as being iconic from that series and either used the original versions within Looking for Alaska, or they actually created new covers of these songs. And so every song that is in Looking for Alaska is from that time period. So nothing is past 2006. So it's all from the early 2000s. Lots of nostalgia vibes. I mean, they even have Milkshake in there in one of the episodes, which, you know, every time I think of Milkshake, I honestly should have put this in there, but I always think of Mean Girls. But you know, it gets you very, very instantaneously into that early 2000s time period. But one of the greatest things, and I think I'll just kind of point out a couple of my favorite moments from the series, but there is a cover of The Bravery's An Honest Mistake that was re-recorded by Mating Ritual with vocals by Lizzie Land. This comes from episode 5 of the 8 series miniseries, and it's at the very end of the episode, kind of takes us at the end. It kind of picks up, some non-diegetic music during a scene in which Pudge and Alaska are talking, and they're about to pull off their biggest prank of the year. That the kind of one of the subplots is that these students who are at this boarding school pull these huge pranks, and they try not to get caught by the administration. And so it kind of picks up right there. You sort of start to get some. Pudge, of course, has feelings for Alaska, but he's dating another girl, and so there's kind of this feeling of like melancholy, wistful wanting, that really is not necessarily there in the Bravery's original version of An Honest Mistake, but the remake of the film, or the remake of the song, brings in these just gorgeous undertones of it's building to a moment, and then at the end of this episode, it cuts to 7 days before, which I guess I can say this as a spoiler alert. So Alaska actually does die in the next episode. In episode 6 is Alaska dies in this really horrific accident. And so it ends on this note of 7 days before. This is 1 week before the accident that kills Alaska, because the entire series, the entire book were kind of broken up in the before period, and then there's the after period. And so this song just brings us into that melancholy moment of the last kind of moment they had together before the accident happens. And then I actually want to talk about another song, which is Orange Sky, and this one actually comes from episode 7, which is the first episode after the accident. And so in this episode, you see all of the main characters kind of going through their grief and working through the pain at losing their friend. And this song, so it was originally by Alexi Murdoch, and it was used again in the OC in season 1. It's actually used in the season 1 finale of the OC, which is when Ryan Atwood is actually returning back to Chino, where he was from, with his ex-girlfriend who's pregnant, and kind of this question of whether or not he's the father, and he's leaving, the life that he'd kind of built in Orange County. And so at the same time, this song Orange Sky in Looking for Alaska was re-recorded by Kat Cunning, and again has this kind of very extremely melancholy tone to it that sort of brings back some of those memories of loss, and looking back at a life that you'll never really have. So I think it's just a really beautiful way that music is incorporated throughout the series. And in the same episode, they do have an original Man of War, which is from 2006, of course. Let me try to look. Who's the musician in Man of War? Oh, Eric Brockman. It's a really classic 2006 song and gets very, very popular at the time. But, it's the mix of the contemporary songs and then also these remakes that I think is just really great and brings out all the nostalgia. So I love it. I'm going to stop rambling. I don't know if anyone else has seen this. I wouldn't be surprised. I'd be surprised if you had, to be honest. I feel like that's my niche, is like teen TV.
So I haven't admittedly seen Looking for Alaska. I did read the book because I did have like a whole young adult Tumblr John Green phase. But I think that at least from what you provided us, which was the trailer, I think it's and what you just said, I think it's fascinating that like they're quite literally pulling from the year that this book was published, which is 2005. So I think it's sort of nice for them to sort of hark towards the source material that they're working with. And I think something else that I think you were noting with like the whole, yes, this book and series is about loss, and sort of these teens really trying to come to terms with, I think a really major thing is Pudge trying to come to terms of whether or not he truly had a crush on Alaska for the person she was, or if it's, the manic pixie dream girl syndrome, I guess, which I think also was just quite quintessential to like the early aughts, 2010s teen movies and television shows. And on top of that, just sort of trying to come to terms with, are you truly to blame in the death of someone if you're like the last person to see them? And I think Pudge starts feeling extremely guilty for the fact that he kind of lets Alaska get in the car while she's driving under the influence and subsequently dies. And kind of, did she purposefully want to drive under the influence to kill herself, or did she just, it was a terrible accident, and who could have really stopped it. And I think, I think it just does, the trailer does a really great job of setting the scene up. I don't think they either allude to her death or they just sort of kind of mention it, but I think you already get that sense, especially of the manic pixie dream girl aesthetic with Alaska, that I think in a way, like, artfully does it in a manner that doesn't romanticize the manic pixie dream girl. It really does highlight Pudge's sort of faults for kind of imposing those those dreams upon her. And I think it's a wonderful book if you're really into young adult novels. I think as a debut novel for John Green, it was really great. But yeah, I think it's such a great sort of way to historicize the O5s, which I think will become more and more of a thing. I think as the millennials get older, and we're gonna have a lot more nostalgia pieces. But I think it is a really great job of sort of anchoring it to the time, while and harking back to those classic television shows that we probably watched or knew about at those time periods. Yeah,
Definitely.
Can I ask a question about the other songs that were in the show real quick?
Yeah,
Did
go
they
for
do-
it, Mike.
Did they do a cover of Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap?
I don't know. Let me look. I have a list pulled up when I was doing kind of my research to find all of the songs. I feel like, they should have. I don't know if they did
it's
though.
just like the OC reference in me. I'm just like, you need to do that.
You have to do that one, right? But I'm not sure that they actually do. They do a cover of I Will Follow You Into the Dark from Death Cab for Cutie, which is another really famous song from the OC. I don't actually think that they do Imogen Heaps. No, I don't see that they do. According to this list that I have, which is from Indie Star, which has it all broken down by every episode, because I kind of just wanted to get a sense of what we were working with in every episode. But I don't see that they did. Oh, although that's very strange to me, because that is such an iconic, that's another great scene, is to have
I've only seen the trailer for the show, and also I watched the trailer. I was like, oh, we have to watch this over break now, because this is also kind of my jam. But it also did the trailer song thing of slow, scary, sad cover of a pop song, but it actually felt kind of earned, even though I had no idea that's what happens to Alaska. But
yeah, they don't totally give it away there, but it does work. And it's in the trailer. The Bravery song on Honest Mistake is used in a completely different context than it is in the actual episode. Yeah, but I agree with you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, totally, it works in that instance.
No, I was like, it's a sad pop song, trailer song that finally works. And after watching so many blockbuster trailers that just go with the so quiet version of it, I'm just like, oh, it can be done good.
It is possible.
Yeah, I think it's, as a theme, I think what we've been kind of talking about, I think there's a difference between sort of just, as Mike was alluding to, just let's just cram those classic songs without truly thinking about how they work with the material, versus truly kind of going through it. And I think it is very artful that you're saying that they're not pulling, the actual, songs. They're mostly covers from what I'm seeing on the list. But at the same time, there are those classic 0506 songs that as teens you're kind of emo in your bedroom listening to. I think there's a Sufjan Stevens cover, there's Death Cab for Cutie, Franz Ferdinand, so it just really brings me back to those days of wow, there was me sitting in my room don't talk to me, mom, I'm having a moment. And I think it again fits extremely well with what Looking for Alaska was kind of going for. I mean, you have Pudge being this sort of pretentious teen guy who's like, I want to, like, my thing is, you know, quoting famous last words of people. And like you know, I seek the great perhaps, or whatever it was, and kind of like, oh, now I found a girl who knows exactly how I feel. And I don't know, it just kind of like, it just works. I think it's a great way to kind of take you into that moment and take you also into the headspace of Pudge, who is this sort of like pretentious, I'm going to listen to my indie rock bands and like, you know, I'm too smart for everyone else around here kind of thing.
Yeah, he's kind of like a little more of an emo version, I think, of Seth Cohen. I mean, Seth Cohen had his comic books, and Pudge has his famous last words, but they kind of still fit into this sort of mode of like an awkward teen. I don't know, kind of trope. But anyways, well, thank you all for indulging me and letting me work the OC into another podcast. This is going to become not the Cineposium podcast. It's going to be the OC podcast if you let me keep coming along.
We could probably license the California song, so you know.
We could. I'll throw this in here. This is my last thing. They actually do have a scene in one of the episodes in which Pudge and Laura are watching the OC, and you just hear the iconic, you know, do 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 theme song music in the background, and it's like, oh, it's so perfect. That's just total like fan like lip service at that moment, but it works as well because it's contemporary. The OC was on from 03 to 07, so right in the middle of when the show was set.
And as John Cleese says, and now for something completely different. So yes, to provide like a completely different shift in content, but it does kind of harken to like what is and what is not like a quote unquote like narratively appropriate use of filmic music, right? So I'm gonna be talking about Climax, specifically the it's kind of referred to as like either the introduction scene or the first choreography scene in the film. This film is a 2018 film by Gaspar Noé. Gaspar Noé is very notorious for like this he doesn't put films in chronological order. He kind of like either does like a strange version of like reverse chronology or just things happening in unusual orders. So this isn't the first scene in the film. And it's not even the first scene chronologically in the narrative, but it is like the first choreography scene that appears in the film itself. If you're watching it like a normal person, so it's a cover actually of Supernature by Ceron, which is a 1977 disco song, and it's an instrumental edit that contains no dialogue, but the song itself is basically like I'm like almost surprised that he included an instrumental version of it, just because the lyrics themselves are so reflective of the plot of the film, in that the song is about essentially a future in which there are chemicals that are used in agriculture seeping into the earth, which causes the creatures down below, and that's like part of the song lyrics, the creatures down below, to take sweet revenge against mankind. And the plot of the film itself is a dance troupe whose sangria is spiked at an after party with LSD, and the descent into chemical madness that the LSD causes. So it's like this like sets up, like, even though it's not the introduction scene, it's not the first scene of the film, it very much sets up like the mood and tone of the entire narrative. Like if you're familiar with this song and you see its use in the film, even if you don't know anything else about the basic plot of the film, you might kind of start to get a little bit of a vibe that something is going to go wrong here. This song is also a part of a much larger take. So the clip that I linked is just the use of the song, which runs about 5 minutes. It's actually part of a longer take lasting 12 total minutes. So the song is the first 5 and it continues into a longer take. Something that I absolutely love about this film in general that I think is like super inspiring. It's like if I was going to teach an introduction to film class to a bunch of people who have never seen cinema before, Climax would be one of the films on that list that I would screen, because just the way that it's done, the way that the film itself is executed is remarkable, and I think that this scene kind of sets that up as well. So it's the film itself is unrehearsed. It's on the spot. It's improv. It's full improvisation. I can't even say it. The cast itself is majority non-actors. They are dancers that Gaspar Noé had found on the internet, at ballrooms, and in crumping circles. He just pulled out like a casting call and was like, I'm just looking for a bunch of people who can dance and can do it very uniquely. He kind of like created the whole film after he had gone to a ballroom and had like seen performance, and then was like, we're just going to do this. There's no script. There was no dialogue given to any of the actors. He pretty much went between every single dancer and was like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you think your character would do in this situation? And then wrote it, and then performed it. And the reason why it's like this is because the body language is more important to him than the actual content of the film. And he thinks that the shape of their bodies that they're able to contort themselves into is kind of like the aesthetic priority of the film. So yes, long take. No choreo, like it was not choreographed. They just did this. They filmed actually 16 total takes of this dance scene set to Supernature, and they ended up using the 15th take because they said that the other takes were just like, you couldn't even, like, just completely unusable, because the styles of dancers that he had selected for the film, it's all solo dancing, like crumping and ballroom and voguing. It's all solo. So these are actors, or I guess dancers really, who were not used to being involved in group choreography whatsoever. So that's why it looks like this, but it looks like controlled chaos. It looks very raw. I think that the song itself playing in the background makes it seem like you're getting the LSD theme, right? Because the song itself is so repetitive and it just keeps playing for like a full 5 minutes as people kind of like writhe around on screen, like vaguely doing something together. And I think that it's quite stunning. I think also in terms of the audio editing in general, I think that it was an interesting choice as well. He doesn't edit out the like latent microphone edit audio, so you can hear the dancers counting down. You can hear people like shouting off camera. You can hear like the line and the crew behind the camera. He kept all that audio in to play over top of the music, which I think adds to the chaos even more effectively. So y'all should watch this film if you haven't.
I think, like, given your sort of introduction to the clip, and also just I don't know, I think when I first saw it, I definitely picked up on the voguing aspect of it. Just, you know, seeing them death drop and duck walk and whatnot, I think just and the fact that you said that there was this sort of crumping, I think gives, like, at least when I first saw this, you know, I'm more familiar with ballroom, and so seeing ballroom was very familiar to me, and I'm like, oh, this definitely makes sense with the music. This is something I could totally imagine being played during ballroom. But then having those very jerky, almost sort of, you know, with crumping, I think it's jerky raw, I think is the best way to describe it, and sort of menacing. Just was a very jarring juxtaposition, but it worked, I think. And given what you said about the plot, I think it does give that sort of, I think the crumping does give that sort of sinister aspect to the dance that alludes to the horrors that are yet to come, I guess. But yeah, I think I really enjoyed it, and it was sort of fascinating to watch. Like, I think even though it is a sort of chaotic group dance, I think adding the individual dancers sort of made it like you have that one highlighted dancer that's usually in the foreground, but you have all those other dancers doing their own thing in the background, sort of added to that LSD trip sort of thing. You have the music kind of going, but they're all sort of in their own world. They're all kind of dancing to the beat of their own drum. They're all having this own mini, like their own experience. And even if it is a collective one, if they're all drugged, but they're all sort of doing their own thing. And I think it just really worked. And it having that repetitive music, yeah, like you said, I think draws you into the experience that they're feeling. And I don't know, it kind of made me want to just like join in with them. But yeah, I really liked it.
I definitely feel that. I wanted to get up and dance. Yeah, I loved the way that it all worked together. And I think what even added to this scene, I know we're specifically kind of focusing on music, but I think the camera work in this scene also kind of brings you into the entire experience of this dance sequence. And so, like you mentioned, Alex, it is a fluid master. It's a long take of a single take, but there is actually a lot of camera movement, and there's a lot of really interesting camera angles because it starts out sort of just, as a master shot. It zooms out to kind of show the whole scene, and then it kind of highlights and focuses sort of the soloist and dancer in the center. But then the camera starts moving around as the scene progresses, and it kind of goes into the dancers. There's this really amazing scene kind of shot close to the end where the camera is above the dancers, which I think is just fantastic. The way that you're getting this dance from so many different angles, and so I think it really makes the viewer feel like you are there in, I don't know, in the moment of the dance, which I think is just really, really cool. So no, I have not seen this, but I'm adding it to my list. Thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, and if you really like that shot, that from above shot of the dancing, there's a scene later in the film which actually is the credit scene, but it's in the middle of the film, but it's the credit scene. And it's not a long take. It's like quick cut editing of like each of the dancers in a circle, dancing, like Kitty Smile versus Thomas Bangalter kind of scene, and the whole scene is filmed from above, so you get to see all these dance moves from the top down. Which is quite spectacular. But I always joke that like you can, well, it's not even like really a joke. It's just facts that you can watch this scene set to Supernature 1,000 times, and like every single time you're going to notice someone else doing something totally different that like you've never seen before. It's like it feels like ADHD is what the scene feels like, and I love it. It's like absolutely addicting to me, and it's so hypnotizing.
Before I make my comments, I just want to quickly comment on, we just had to say bye to Alexandra. They had to leave to I guess attend another meeting, I think. So anyways, in case you don't hear them, that's why. But yeah, so this scene, first and foremost, I wanted to say, like, if I feel like another list type of or topic that on this show that we could do is like the drug trip sequences, and this would definitely be in there for me. I think about, like, there's a scene in Mad Men that I just absolutely love, like, rewatching. It's so good. But anyways, okay, so blew my mind that you said that this scene is unrehearsed. I mean, they did it 16 times, I guess, but the fact that it's unrehearsed kind of blows me away, because my comments or my notes that I took down as I was watching are, sort of focusing on just how well choreographed this seems to be to me. I'm not a dancer, right? I don't, I don't quite understand the movements and complexities of what they're doing in terms of what might be just spontaneous and what might be previously choreographed. So maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I think for me, there's just, first, as you said, Alex, there's this music that feels like a loop of music, right? Like it's just repetitive. It's just kind of building up the energy for these dancers, and for you watching. Like, I feel like I watch and my heart's just pumping because it's music. And yeah, I might want to get up and dance as well. But the way that these dancers are moving sort of across the sort of ground that they're performing on, and how the camera or how they move around in the frame, then it feels so purposeful, and really it feels like limbs and different body parts and movements are sort of drawing your attention from here to there, from this group to this group, from this single dancer to this group. It's like it really just feels like nonstop energy and movement. And I think the fact that that's unrehearsed, just that's on another level of performing that I don't know, but it's incredible to experience. And I think um, a comment that was made earlier was that some of the movements and sort of contortions lead into the horrors that come later, and I didn't quite put together how just different sort of abstract versions of dance can feel like body horror in a way, and that's another fascinating topic that I think we could spend some time on later, because certainly there are other films with dance and horror sort of blended together. So yeah, fascinating thing to think about, and just a really great film and sequence here for sure.
Yeah, and kind of speaking to like the dance and horror, I always tell people, like, if you liked the newer release of Suspiria and you liked the original Polish film Possession, you're going to absolutely love Climax, because it's literally just like the definition of like dance body horror, and it's phenomenal.
That's a topic for later on, Alex. We totally got to do that. We got to cover that episode later for sure.
Please, yes. And now for something slightly related, but a little bit different. We have the Frankie Goes to Hollywood relax sequence from Body Double, from Brian De Palma's Body Double. So there's a couple different things going on in here. So I'm going to talk about the song first, which is Relax by Frankie Goes to Hollywood. This is a 1983 song, so it was recorded before the release of the film. The film itself is a 1984 film, but was intentionally included. Like this was like, it was not made for the film, but essentially it might as well have been made for the film. So like Relax ended up getting like a little bit of a controversial release. It was top like when it had come out, it was like top 100 on like the UK charts. It is a UK record. But it was also banned in the UK. It's like simultaneously the most controversial and most commercially successful records that had like existed at the time. The problem is that it did have a radio airplay ban by the BBC because of the overtly sexual lyrics, which was like what their issue was with it, which is of course an issue that like they carried into Body Double when they would when the BBFC would later have to provide it a rating and decide whether or not to release it. I just love the fact that it was like, we're going to ban this, but also it's going to be exceedingly popular. So the sequence in which it is used in Body Double is part of a film within a film sequence. So Frankie Goes to Hollywood is performing their song Relax. That's them. They're in the video. They're in the film. They're performing their song Relax on the set of a pornographic film that is being filmed within, as part of the plot of Body Double. We got like 8 layers of world building here. And inside of this pornographic film in which they're performing Relax, Brinky Stevens is there. Brinky Stevens is a scream queen, classic horror, most known probably for like the Slumber Party Massacre. She's fantastic. So she's in there, she's doing a dance, she's dancing on top of the singer from Frankie Goes to Hollywood's back. At one point, there's also like actual real pornographic actors in this scene as well, that are like inserted there as extras, to kind of give like this illusion that like this is like a real set of a pornographic film that's going to be taking place. So like if you are watching this, and you would probably recognize the actors if you were watching this and also watching porn in the 80s. Which not many people are doing right now currently, but they were big names at their time. Care a Lot and Annette Haven were the two that had appeared. There's also voice actor Rob Paulson, who was known for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles later. He did Pinky from Animaniacs and Pinky and the Brain. He was Carl Weezer from Jimmy Neutron. He cameos here as the camera operator, and he famously utters "Where's the cum shot?" Later in the film as well. So he gets a very nice he gets a very nice line. I love this film. I keep calling it I love this film. I'm specifically referring to the pornographic film within that, like, they're building within Body Double, because this is a fun film. It reminds me a lot of like the atmosphere, the tone, the kind of narrative that they're building within this pornographic film kind of reminds me a lot of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where you have your main character who's kind of playing like this really like innocent kind of looking geeky dude who is like stumbled upon this kink. It's a voyeurism kink, and now he is being, you know, invited and escorted into the world of pornography and getting to watch. So the entire sequence is like so strange because it's the only musical sequence in the entire film, and it just kind of comes like right in the middle of the entirety of Body Double, just kind of thrown in there, and it's very De Palma. It's so like self-referential. It's so like 8 different layers of film. It's like telling you so many things about these characters, because I think that well, I mean, like the entirety of Body Double itself is built on like the premise of voyeurism in what the main character believes to be a non-pornographic sense, but in reality it is pornographic, and inviting you to be the spectator and, you know, spectate along with, like, yeah, it's fantastic, and it's such a banger. The song is phenomenal. It's just like you want to get up and dance, so that's why I selected it.
Yeah. Okay, so another admission, I have not seen this film, unfortunately, but agree. This song is a banger. It's come up in a couple other instances and other things I've watched, but I feel like, yeah, as you said, this song may as well have been written for this film because it seems to fit so perfectly. Again, I haven't seen the film, but it first, what surprised me was I wasn't expecting the, you know, lip singing element to it, and how it, you know, it kind of breaks the wall in that way. Um, which is that the only instance in the examples that we're bringing today that involves that sort of treatment? I think it is.
Yeah, because I mean, there's the lip syncing in Beetlejuice, but it's
True. Okay. Duh.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then that's another one, but yeah, I wasn't expecting it, and yeah, it certainly plays into that sense of like sort of inviting this person into this space that I think I really enjoyed. It just it does feel so inviting and sort of fun, and I just love that he's sort of like having fun with it, because I think it does a really good job of establishing that feeling even furthermore. But yeah, it kind of has this like music video feeling to me, which I think was also really fun about it.
Yeah, and I think that this is the one selection that we have that is the most music video like, because I think this is also the only one we have where the actual performer of the song is performing the song, which is super unusual just in general in films at all, period, outside of musicals. But like even more so when you have like a pop culture song. So
Yeah, I love the richness of the scene. And I mean, it makes a lot more sense now that you you explained it a bit, that they're going on to this actual movie set. Um, but I love how detailed and rich and textured everything is, and how the music kind of plays along. And I actually think it works really well with your other pick, Alex, from Climax, that you don't have to just watch the main characters. And it's Craig Wasson, who played Jake, is kind of the main, this maybe not the main character, but the central character that the camera is focused on, that he's the viewpoint or the point of view person for the audience, who brings the audience and the viewer into the scene, because he's experiencing this all for kind of the first time, and so is the audience. So you can watch him, but I think there's so much else going on in this scene, and all of the other performers who are singing and dancing along, and they have all of their own little asides kind of taking place, that your eye can really wander throughout this scene, just like in Climax, and watch different parts, and maybe every time you see it, you kind of are drawn to maybe a different moment or a different little vignette that's taking place within the scene. And I think that just also adds to the richness of the overall scene that I love. And it just works so well with this music. It's such a great music placement.
Yeah, and I think that like to speak to your eye being drawn and like the challenge of like trying to watch everyone, I feel like De Palma's kind of like inviting that challenge, right? Because else he wouldn't have all of these cameos. Like he wants you to
Yes.
look at every single person and like try to figure out if they're from something, especially like the pornographic actresses where you're like, oh, I know her from somewhere. It makes sense that she would be on the set of a porn film within a film. But is that actually her? You know, because you're not used to seeing some of these people in this context. Even the Scream Queen, who has her cameo as well, Brinky Stevens. She's in a position where like she usually wouldn't be. Like she always kind of played like the innocent kind of like teenage girl role that like later Jamie Lee Curtis would end up playing, right? But she's, you know, wearing leather and is barefoot walking on a singer's back. And like the camera pays attention to that. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I feel like that's very De Palma-esque with just the complexity of all of his shots. So it definitely fits with his filmography.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite De Palma films as well. This is again like another one where it's like if no one's ever seen a film ever before in their life and they needed to see kind of like the extent of how complex films can get in terms of like self-referentiality, Body Double that goes on the list. Yeah, and then Mike, do you want to go with Sucker Punch next? Because I
Yes.
think that's next.
So like on that note of like crazy referentiality and all that, like I brought to the table the Love is the Drug sequence from Sucker Punch, the extended cut, which is the only version of that movie you should watch. Have any of you guys ever seen that movie though? Like it's one of those things where I'm like, is it popular? I don't know. But yeah. So I saw the theatrical cut and was just kind of like, well, that movie was terrible. And then I came across the sequence because I heard about the director's cut. And I was like, yeah, I'll get to it eventually. I saw they put back in the musical sequences because this movie was supposed to be this like weird jukebox musical about empowerment. And so you have this sequence from Love is the Drug, which is a cover of Love is the Drug, which is by the band Roxy, that takes place in the burlesque show brothel reality tier of the film. The film is this it's this very dreamlike when it was coming out, everyone's like, oh, it's Inception, of basically women using the power of fantastical narratives to regain some measure of control when they're stuck in this mental asylum by evil dads, evil men in general, who are all vicious fucking scumbags. And so Love is the Drug is this really this indictment of the like Snyder was like, it's this indictment of geek culture of like white male geek culture, and to agree, and it is, but like really the drug sequence is, it's an indictment of like basically capitalism in general, also as a need to commodify women's bodies. And it's just like it's a Zack Snyder movie. The symbolism is never subtle. Like there's a champagne bottle that is just blows its cork and spurts forth frothing white bubbles, and like that, like it's a delightful, like it's at once a sequence of like, this is very beautifully done, but then at the same time you're like, oh, this is all horrible and like not very good. And so it's probably my second or third favorite thing he's ever directed, the sequence specifically. And just Oscar Isaac is just perfect as just mustachioed asshole. To put it lightly, it's just he's so hateable, but also is suave. It's just kind of delightful in a very perverse way. And yeah, so I just it's a really good moment that encapsulates the entire movie to me. And then the other part also because I'm me, I have reading recommendations, which is to go read Sucker Punch and the Aesthetics of Denial from Future Perfect Text by Virginia Kuhn, from Future Texts, Subversive Performances and Feminist Bodies. The little trivia note: the cover for that book is very tactilely satisfying to hold. But the other one I brought was another musical sequence from a Zack Snyder movie, which was the credit sequence to Watchmen, which I have a very awkward relationship with Watchmen in that I so tired. I hate Watchmen. I don't like the movie, like it's fine. They're all movies. I don't care. But I'm of that generation where everything is in the shadow of Watchmen. And I'm like, it's been over 20, 30 years. You guys need to come up with something new. And the movie version of Watchmen, the only thing that is new, besides extra hyper violence to put home the fact that, hey guys, people beating each other up is violent and both spectacular, but in that spectacle you should feel bad, or at least question like your feel of joy over seeing compound fractures. Is this the Watchmen credit sequence is set to Times Era Changing by oh god, it's the guy from Inside Llewyn Davis at the end. I'm blanking on his name.
Dylan, right?
Yes, Bob Dylan. Yes. But basically it is a montage that explains what roughly 40 years of masked vigilantes have done to the world, the socio-political world after World War II with the arrival of Dr. Manhattan and everything. And it's just this wonderfully constructed montage that is also like referencing a whole bunch of art, and it's delightful in a way that like I don't think people would consider Zack Snyder movies delightful. Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts?
Yes. So I think I'll start with Watchmen and then I'll circle back to Sucker Punch. I have to say the opening credits sequence in Watchmen is probably the most enjoyable part of Watchmen. I wish that would have been something that would have been kind of like the holdover, where it was like if we were going to take anything from Watchmen and incorporate that into a larger trend of popular culture, I wish it would have been that sequence, because it's just so fantastic. It's not just the way that the scene is framed with the music. It's that, yeah, I mean, again, like we're getting into like 8 different layers of like self-referential, because it's like he's managed somehow to like spend that entire sequence incorporating the unknown superhero universe into the known universe, and he's kind of using like Bob Dylan's song to kind of like join the two, right? So like we see popular things that we know of, like the Kennedy assassination, and then the camera pans over and we see that who was responsible for the Kennedy assassination was the comedian, and it's like continuously like popping up images from popular culture, like dark popular culture, that probably now I think would be even more of an effective watch than it was when it had first come out, just because like there seems to be like some kind of trend towards like true crime consumption right now. So like the images of like there's a recreation of one of the Jack the Ripper murders in there as well, but like with superheroes inserted into it. There's a lot of like these instances of the familiar being made unfamiliar, all set to this piece by Bob Dylan, and that piece itself is a protest piece, which I think is also like really important too, like because I think he's writing it during or slightly before or after the Vietnam War. I know it was 1964, but I'm really bad at like scaling time when it comes to like US history, so I'm not actually sure where that falls in terms of the Vietnam War. But he has like the entire song itself is about racism, poverty, social change, trying to call politicians out of their positions who have been holding them for decades, because like they're out of touch with the way that modern society is going, and they're withholding change and legislation, and it's like a really like in your face kind of song, which I think works also really well with kind of the message that Zack Snyder is pulling out, is that this is the times that are changing. The superheroes are going out of fashion, and they're going out of style due to the legislation that's being passed within the context of the film. But at the same time, like, is this a positive change? Is this a negative change? The world is in the midst of the Cold War, nuclear meltdown of Russia and all that. It's fantastic. But I like going down to Sucker Punch. The costuming in Sucker Punch is superior, and I would have preferred it if the costuming in Watchmen had looked anything at all like the costuming in Sucker Punch. We would have had a really amazing film, like a truly amazing film, because like the costuming just in that section of Love is a Drug, like fully pulls me into it. It's like, I know that Sucker Punch is not a period piece. I know that it is very like surrealist. I know that it's fantastical in so many ways, but like watching the Love is a Drug clip and looking at the costuming, he's like period accurate with the costuming within a realm of like, this is not a period, which is like spectacular to me. Like the fact that like you can look at the costuming that's being done on like the burlesque performance and like understand that like we're supposed to be like kind of looking at this as like a harkening back to like 1960s masculine power dynamics. It's stunning. It's frankly stunning, and I love the shininess. Everything is so sparkly, which is also a bonus.
So you're saying, Mike, that the extended version of Sucker Punch is the Snyder Cut we should watch?
Technically speaking, the Snyder Cut of Sucker Punch doesn't exist because, one, that's only like 2 hours and 10 minutes. It's not even 4 hours. Come on. But like that's the only one that's out there that makes it into a coherent film. Apparently, there is a longer version that includes a female-centric sex scene between Emily Browning's character and John Hamm that he had to cut because the MPAA would only allow him to have it in the movie if it looked like it wasn't Emily Browning's character's decision in the first place, because the MPAA is terrible. And like also there's a couple more musical sequences that they just either didn't get to film or just aren't cobbled together. And he keeps saying like, I might finally be able to put out a different version of that movie once contracts run out for like it's on Stars or something, I think. Yeah, but it's with all Zack Snyder movies, watch the extended cut if you can, because those are the ones that he wanted to probably put out in the first place.
I love both of these picks that you shared with us, because they're both so stylized but in completely different ways. And I think the musical choices kind of enhance that stylization that we're seeing in both of the scenes. And I think that's so great. The thing that really sticks out to me, though, of course, from Watchmen is I just, in my mind, keep thinking, wow, that must have been such an expensive music placement to get. Because generally when you're doing picks for television or for a movie in music supervision, the opening and end credits are the most expensive picks. That's where the majority of your budget is going to go. And then the fact that it's a Bob Dylan song for this opening title sequence, that was one of the things that kept hitting me. I was like, wow, this must have been so expensive to produce, like just to get that one song in this movie. But I think it was money well spent, because it really like you both were mentioning it, the themes of this 1963 protest song kind of dealing with this like kind of gritty superheroes, times are changing. It just works so well. So it was money well spent in my opinion, but I just kept thinking, wow, this was an expensive music pick.
Also, I think he ruined using Hallelujah in songs with, well, no, because like he's talked about this, like they're like, you should use this song. He's like, fine, I'll make it into a huge joke because you should listen to the lyrics. And so he's like, here's my funny sex scene, you guys. But also it's like, it's like also his daughter's favorite song, and that's why it's at the end of Zack Snyder's Justice League that I haven't seen yet. It's just complicated feelings.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I'm like, I don't know the context behind it, so I don't want to like make too much fun of it. But the fact that it was like, we're gonna make fun of this as like a sex scene in Watchmen, and then it's gonna be like a very emotional song because of my daughter in the Snyder Cut. I'm like, you're clowning me. What am I watching?
What's happening? I love when songs are like self-referential, but then also when they're just totally like out of left field. And I feel like there's some inside joke there that I'm not getting, but it's just wild and kind of weird, and I'm here for it.
People contain multitudes, man. We're complex people.
I don't have too much more. I feel like I don't have too much more to say than that's already been said. But I want to just like ditto the notion that Oscar Isaac is just awesome in that performance in Sucker Punch, and his partner in that scene. I feel like I always forget her name.
Carla Gugino.
Carla Gugino, right? I want them to just perform like every genre of music and decade aesthetic and everything. Just I want to watch that movie. Just watch them perform nonstop for 2 hours. I'll do that.
I'm almost wondering if we should carry the Hallelujah thread into how that's not the greatest musical sing that Patrick Wilson has ever been a part in.
Oh God, yeah.
I can't get over it. I can't like that scene in Watchmen is just permanently embedded in my brain forever. Like
Try watching that film with your mom in the theaters, though. Oof. She's like, Mommy, take me to this R-rated movie. I need your money to see it.
I watched it with my dad, and at one point during that scene, we both looked at each other, and like my dad was like, "That was the worst sex scene I've ever seen in my life."
Oh my goodness. I can't imagine.
It was like 101 on how not to film a sex scene. Like if I'm teaching that course, we're sticking that scene in there. Like no shade, but like yeah, we're
There should be a course though, how to not do things. I would be in that class in a heartbeat. All of the worst examples of everything. Because I feel like at a point in that class, it would get to there's so much bad thing, so much badness that it starts to become good. Because always a point where just things are so terrible. It's like, is this really bad or is it actually good? And I'm digging it.
I am
Want
waiting.
that to be a class. Can you please like propose that to be a class that you would teach, Alex? Like I would love that.
Not only would I propose it, I would then, like 5 years later, unironically end up writing a scholarship piece on how Zack Snyder successfully like managed to like desexualize the on-screen sex scene and like in the same time has managed to like in that sex scene like not objectify anyone.
That's a book I would read.
The feminist hero. I just can't like Malin Ackerman is so beautiful. How did he manage? It just looks so bad.
You're just dying over there, and I love it.
I know that he can make things look sexy. I've seen 300. What happened?
Like the unsexiness is the point. But also, like, God, Watchmen made me think Malin Ackerman wasn't a good actress for a while. And then I saw her in more things. Like, oh, she's actually good. This is perfect.
I can't. I can't do it.
Okay, well, shall we move into honorable mentions before we wrap this bad boy up?
We really should.
Yes, let's.
Okay, let's
We've
do
gotten way
this.
off track at this point.
I'm making the executive decision here. So okay, I mean we don't have to get too much into these, but if anyone wants to throw out any honorable mentions here, we can just list off some more fun ones for people to check out in case they're interested. I'll start one for me that I really wanted to include here, but I ended up just not making the cut barely, is from The Conjuring 2, oddly enough, Patrick Wilson playing Ed Warren. He performs the oh my goodness, this what is it called? Can't oh my god.
Can't help falling in love with
Thank you. Thank you. Can't help falling in. Thank you. I don't know why that was escaping me, but and that was just because I mean it really to quickly talk about it for a sec. I think it's just the perfect like moment of levity in this horror film that just involves so much terror throughout for this family and for this young character in particular, and it really kind of I think nails the themes and the sort of guidance that Ed and Lorraine Warren sort of preach throughout, and so I think it's just a beautiful sort of scene for the family, and brings about that levity that you need to sort of breathe in the middle of all this terror. So that was one for me that I really love.
Yeah, and I love it too. I think it's also like super like originally in the film, I have like a lot of problems with like The Conjuring 2 just as a film constructed. But like originally I wasn't into the scene, right? I wasn't into it like when it first popped up. I thought that it was like a weird pacing decision. But like as the scene continued, I was like, "Oh, wow. No, this is actually like really good and like really well done and it's probably like one of the best scenes within The Conjuring 2 itself." And probably like the entire Conjuring franchise as a whole. I think that's like super effective. I think that just the amount of chemistry that's being passed back and forth between Ed and Lorraine is like, wow, like I am
Yeah.
in love with this. Like you can like there is like legitimate just the acting is just like so good that you're just like, wow, like she is in love with him and he is in love with her and this is like a reckoning. And yeah.
Seriously, it's a gut punch, that scene, and I mean that's part of it as well. There's stakes involved here, and if you know the narrative of the film, there's a lot going on in this moment for them both internally and for this family, and so yeah, there's a lot at play, and so I agree that might be the best scene, especially for Ed and Lorraine Warren in their films, sort of thing. I think that's the perfect sort of reflection on who they are and what they teach. So anyone else have any honorable mentions they want to include here?
Broadly, the music of the Americans on FX, but specifically In the Air Tonight from the pilot, they actually make that song work in a way that isn't like a parody of its use in Miami Vice. And then also at the series finale, they ended up going with or Without You by U2 at the last minute because of rights issues, and it fits so perfectly with the editing that they didn't really have to change much. But like that, they had a musical budget and they used it for some really obscure stuff that really works. Americans is a really good show. More people should have watched it.
I'll jump in. I actually have two that I want to talk about really quickly. So the first one, it was so close. It was so close. And then I had to talk about Bridgerton because I knew Alex was going to bring up Marie Antoinette. But I want to talk about season 2, episode 3 of Sherlock. So this is the episode called The Reichenbach Fall. And it has to deal with the trial of James Moriarty. And there's this amazing sequence of them getting ready to go to trial. Sherlock is going to be like the star key witness, and Cinnamon by Nina Simone plays in the background. So it's just the driving percussion in that song. I think works so well in that scene with the cuts. It's not 100% edited to the music, but the pacing of the scene does keep up with that driving percussive kind of bass line, and like the piano at the very end of that song works so well. And then of course the lyrics, the idea of a sinner man, James Moriarty being the villain of Sherlock, and then especially this season, um, just works really, really well together. So that's an excellent, one of my favorite scenes of all time. And I think that Nina Simone pick for that sequence is fantastic. And then the second one I want to bring up just really quickly, this is from the season 4 finale of Orange is the New Black. The song is Muddy Waters by LP. And so this, of course, happened. This is the last episode of this season. In the episode right before, why do all my picks involve people dying? I don't know. But this episode right before, Pusey was accidentally killed in this peaceful prison protest, which then, of course, turns violent because of her death. And in this episode, the next episode after her death, we actually get flashbacks. So it's intercutting between the building tensions within the women's prison, and then flashbacks to Pusey's life prior to being incarcerated. And so at the very end of the scene, it's the tensions are rising, the riot is really taking off. Muddy Waters starts to build throughout that sequence, and then it cuts to Pusey, out in the real world, in her before life, and she's staring out. It takes place in New York City, so I'm not sure if it's the East River or the Hudson River. I'm not familiar enough with New York to know which river. She's like looking out at Manhattan across the river, and then she turns and breaks the fourth wall and looks directly at the camera before the scene ends. It cuts, and then the music swells, of course, for the ending sequence. But it's just a really beautiful sequence, and the music choice in that moment is amazing. I remember I had to stop the first time I watched it. I was like, that was one of the best music pieces that could have been used there for that moment. So I think it's really pretty. So those are my 2 honorable mentions.
My two honorable mentions I didn't actually end up adding to the playlist because I got really lazy. So so they're not on there. So don't worry. Um but like my first honorable mention is definitely John Wick. Killing Strangers, controversial choice to select a Marilyn Manson song for, many reasons. Um Nowadays to say that like, oh, this Marilyn Manson song is like my favorite song that they used in John Wick. But it works so well. And honestly, like I was gonna pick like if I was gonna pick like a second runner up, it would have also been a David Leitch film, Atomic Blonde. Just because I think that like to me the use of choreography of any types like when set to songs is like that blows my mind in films. Like it just does. It just blows my mind consistently in films. And David Leitch does just amazing fight choreography to pop culture songs in both John Wick and Atomic Blonde. But like Killing Strangers specifically is like so John Wick. Like I feel like that song again is just kind of doing the same thing that like Supernature and Climaxes, where it's like setting the whole tone of the film. We're killing strangers so that we don't kill the ones that we love. And yeah, like that's is such his vibe. Like that is the vibe of John Wick. And so the scene where it like plays out in full, because like it's kind of like the sub background theme song for like the whole film in the first place, but like the scene where it plays in full is the scene where they're killing Willem Dafoe's character, who is like one of John Wick's closest friends and who was betraying him, who was going to betray him, but didn't end up betraying him. And that's why he's getting killed. So it's just a fantastically like emotional scene. There's like a great depth. Like we got great monologues going on, the whole 9 yards. It's fantastic. Well, another one that I was thinking of, since I can't find the one that I was actually thinking of, the use of How to Save a Life in Scrubs. This is like one of my only TV picks ever. It was pretty much like used again as like a theme song for like the central framing of like an entire episode. It was season 5, episode 20. In Scrubs. Basically the plot of the whole episode was like there was a transplant that they had rushed because they needed like so many organs in one day, and like a guy had died in a car crash that like had every single organ up for donation that they needed. And so they take shortcuts and they end up trying to save 3 terminal patients using these transplants. But in the process of taking the shortcut, they end up not properly performing tests that they needed to have done, because like the guy died in a car crash. He didn't die of natural causes, so they were like, well, he was probably healthy then. He was probably healthy. They act on the assumption that these were healthy organs, and the reality was that these were not healthy organs. And so all 3 of the patients that they ended up thinking that they had saved, they had actually killed. They would have survived had they taken the proper precautions, had they waited for the transplant list, had they not bumped them up. And so the song ends up playing throughout like the entirety of like the end sequence of the episode, where Dr. Cox, who's the mentor character who had made this decision because he was like so sure that he was going to save these lives, has just been told that he just lost all 3 patients, and he ends up quitting. He's like, this is the hardest day I've ever had in like my entire history of like medical career. He's like, I can't do this anymore. It's not going to happen. And he walks out. And that is I believe it is the season finale as well. So it is just a really powerful use of that song, which tends to get used a lot in medical dramas. Like I feel like that song was like used in like every primetime television show ever when it came out. It was one of those songs that like we'd said earlier that like in like rom-coms and stuff, they just pick like the most popular song at the time and stick it in the rom-com. It was definitely that song, but I feel like this particular use of it was the only one that was like spectacular in my mind. So that's one of my backups.
Yeah, for sure. Michael put in the chat, it's the anti-Grey's Anatomy usage of that song, because I think How to Save a Life became famous because Alexandra Patsavitz, my fave, put it in Grey's Anatomy, kind of, I think, pretty recently prior to the Scrubs episode. But of course, it was used in the more traditional way. These are doctors; they're saving lives. But I love the way that Scrubs uses it. That's a great pick. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because I feel like for some reason the other uses of the songs don't address the melancholy nature of the song. Like they kind of go like, "Oh, how to save a life? Okay, this is how we save a life," and it's like here's a bunch of medical procedures. But the song actually isn't happy. Like the song is like a depressing breakup kind of song. You know, where did I go wrong? I lost a friend somewhere along the bitterness. Like that's not happy. And I feel like this is the only one that like really managed to like actually play on the like where did I go wrong? We lost friends. Like the whole scenario ends up creating like this big tension between the characters because like their mentor just left. They were friends. He's never coming back. He sinks into this huge depression. So I feel like that was like a notable use of it correctly.
Well, is that gonna do it for our honorable mentions, or is there anything else that you guys want to bring up at all?
Hello Zep from the end of Saw. The end of the first
Ah,
Saw film. Hello
of
Zep.
course, of course.
That is my favorite, where it's like the corpse is getting up, the corpse is standing up, and then we have like this spastic flashback to like all the events that happened in the film, and game over, and he slams the the door. That's one of my favorite underrated uses of music. Like anytime they play Hello Zep and Saw, you know you're about ready to get like the craziest mind-blowing plot twist you've ever seen in your life. And you're gonna enjoy it the whole time too.
That is such a great pool. I don't know how you didn't remember that, but that's such a great pool.
It was definitely because I was thinking too hard about it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I think I guess that will now do it. And I think we're gonna try and put together some sort of like streaming event with the playlist of everything we're talking about and perhaps more. But we'll sort that out later and perhaps put that out there in the world. But anyways, thank you again, everyone, for joining me on this topic. I think this was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can do more audience poll topics as we move along here. So yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Yay.
Bye.
It's nice
thanks.
seeing all of you guys.
That's it for our show this week. Thank you for listening and for your support. Please subscribe to the show on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Cineposium and on Twitter at Cposium to keep up with our updates and to keep in communication with us. Until next week, take care, everyone.